enriched by so much of this day that I have witnessed.
Louder.
What a marvelous idea came to you, Roshi Joan. And I am so grateful to be included in the voices that you are bringing to so many. So I'd like to say that for, just a second, so for the last 40 years, I've been growing a form of experiential group work. It's called the work that reconnects. And it actually, one way of describing it is that it helps people tell the truth about what they experience is happening to their world. And it helps them find the motivations and tools and resources for taking part in the healing of their world. Now, at the outset, when we're getting underway, we help each other discern certain features of the present situation, which include 3 stories or versions of reality that are progressively shaping our world so that they can see them more clearly and choose which one they want to get behind. Now, these 3 are business as usual, the great unraveling, and the great turning, as we put it. So, business as usual, by that, we mean you got to grow the economy. That means global corporate capitalism. Now, we also call that the industrial growth society, because its key feature is the necessity to keep growing the economy, which of course commodifies our earth. And also we for those nations that don't like to use the word capitalist, because though they come to resemble it in their so many voices tell us the story of necessity for economic growth. Politicians running for government posts, corporations, and the military, and the corporate control media. Just a second. Now, the next is the great unraveling. And I love that term because not only does it refer to the unraveling of ecological, biological, social systems as we are commodifying them, but I like the term because systems, all of these don't just fall over dead, but they just gradually, as they're under assault, being mined and extracted and commodified, they lose their coherence, their integrity, their memory, how to keep on going. So that's the second feature of the state we're in. And the third story of our era is the transition to a life-sustaining culture. Now, I want you to know, and we emphasize this and demonstrate it, that this transition to a life-sustaining culture is a revolution in the magnitude and scope comparable to the agricultural revolutions 10,000 years ago, or the industrial revolution a few centuries back. There are many ways to refer to it, but we've taken in the work that we connect to calling it the Great Turning. So, seeing this trio, or put it simply, our work is to help us survive the first 2 stories and bring more and more people and resources into this third story, this transition, this turning. Over the last couple of years, a number of us recognize that given the pace of the great unraveling and the destruction being wrought by the industrial growth, we are heading toward economic and indeed social collapse. I think encourage in thinking about collapse has been helped by the deep adaptation work of Jem Bendell and Deep Adaptation Forum. Say nothing of earlier work and studies by Pablo Salvini, France and Belgium, and his company, whose books are only just now coming out in English. And since the we're finding courage to look at the possibility of collapse or even the likelihood of it, and since our world economy has proven incapable so far of cutting greenhouse gas emissions at all, it is now obvious that we cannot avoid a climate catastrophe. We have been assuming that the great turning to a life-sustaining society be able to come first or to forestall such a collapse. But now we've come to see it. The great turning is more like a vision and a commitment within us that can help us survive the collapse of the industrial growth society and keep on going. And the motivation and the skills that we gain in the work that reconnects will serve us here in providing perseverance, inspiration, trust. In that case, in a way, I think the great turning becomes something more internal, like almost like bodhicitta, which is the bodhisattva's determination to serve the welfare of all beings, like a flame in the heart.
Thank you. Would you please stop the video now?
Now,
sure.
With the likelihood
And Carolyn, I think you are going to take the screen, right?
Not yet. I will cue you and I want it queued up.
All right.
So, Jean, did you want to say anything before I go?
I just was going to introduce you and say that you have studied with Joanna Macy yourself for 37 years, I think you said, and are still doing so. And you have been an anti-nuclear activist and a climate activist since being trained by Al Gore in 2007. And we're excited to hear your presentation about the work that reconnects, the way that Joanna Macy suggests that one way that we can deal with these three stories.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you all hear me? Okay. And I'd just be interested to know how many of you have some familiarity with Joanna Macy and her work. Just put your hand up so I can see it. Okay, so some of you do and some of you don't. It's been my fortune to have Joanna first as my teacher, and then as my mentor, and then as my colleague, and then as my friend. And we keep in touch with each other. She's still going strong at 91. She's given up doing workshops, but she is always online somewhere giving talks and interviews and so on. She has really influenced the way that I see the world. The year I started with her was 1983, which is also the year that she wrote one of her most important books, or early important books, despair and personal power in the nuclear age. And at that time, the issue was terror over nuclear catastrophe by the Cold War. And what she discovered and found ways to do was she realized that everybody was terrified, just terrified about annihilation. And to get able to go on in the day with that terror, you had to numb it out. But then when you numbed that out, you numbed out your good positive energies to do something about it. So she developed experiential group work that allowed people to express their feelings very deeply and profoundly, and come together to support each other and to decide what actions to keep on taking. And the name of her work has changed over the years, from despair and empowerment work to the work that reconnects us with ourselves, each other, and the planet, which is still the main name, but she's also known as for Active Hope, which is the title of one of her books. And so if you've heard of Active Hope, it's the same as the work that reconnects. And there are key concepts in all of this work. We all have, so some of them are, we all have something to offer, each one of us, and we can be resources for each other. We are here in the present time as the present time beings, but the ancestors are much with us, and the future beings are much with us. So something unusual happens about time, where past, present, and future are here together. There's always been a great connection with the planet, with nature, with ecosystems, and indigenous wisdom is very important, as are Buddhist concepts. And the community that comes out of these circles, these workshops, and so on, builds a container of safety and builds support, each of the other. So the basic structure, and now Bruce, would you put on the graphic? The basic structure is a spiral. And while Bruce is trying to put that up, it's also on your program for the day. It's in an upper left-hand corner in miniature. Can you put that up, Bruce?
I'm not sure that I got that previously, so I will pull it up from the program.
Can you make me share my screen? Because
yes, you can share your screen if you've got it on your computer.
I've got it. So how do I share screen?
If you move your cursor, and then you should have a command bar that opens up at the bottom, and the green button is the share screen.
I see. Okay. And then
choose whichever monitor or window you want to share with the rest of us, and you can double click that. There we go. It looks good.
Okay. Can you see that?
Well done.
All right. Thank you. So there are 4 steps in the spiral. The bottom, where you see on the right bottom and the roots, is gratitude. And gratitude is something that got woven in later. It wasn't one of our earlier concepts, but it's absolutely crucial because these times are crazy. And so how do we hang on and keep going? So the gratitude practice is to provide stability and some way to ground yourself. And so if we were doing a workshop, I might start out with a question for you and the rest of the group to consider. Such a question could be, in the midst of all that's going on in these chaotic times, I am very grateful for, and then you put that in. So I want to ask each of you to take in that question and to think now of something you're grateful for. I'm sorry we can't go on with the process, but that gives you an idea. Her sentences to finish are a very important kind of practice. So
Carolyn, do you want people to put what they're thinking of in the chat?
No, because we don't have the time.
Okay.
I don't want people distracted to look at the chat. But thank you, though. Gotcha. That would be a good idea. The second, and so remember that. Remember what you're grateful for. And remember to think every day what I'm grateful for, and to ground in that. Keeps you going. The second step is honoring our pain, and you see it where the leaves are. And that is so, so very important. That does the unnumbing that I talked about. And it's, we create a special circle called a truth mandala, and persons take turns sharing something of their pain. They can't share it all, but taking something. And others giving them the profound gift of listening, really listening, not talking back, but listening. And people find this very moving, very impactful, and very freeing. The third step is seeing with new eyes, which is really also ancient eyes, because indigenous wisdom has known the things we need to know now for millennia. And let's see. An example of seeing with new eyes would be seeing our profound interconnection with all of the web of life. We are not Homo sapiens at the top of the heap. We are one small part of a great ecosystem. And when you realize that, it changes how you can be in the world and who's in charge of what. The fourth step is going forth. And that means going on, keeping on, keeping on. And there are, as Joanna said in her little video, there are ways of discernment to help you find what your calling is, what you are drawn to do. And so that I wish we had the day together. And if anyone's interested in something about that for the future, let me know. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. If I can get the right thing. Stop share, all right. And just say a little bit more before my time is out. Joanna's work is now all over the world. It's truly unbelievable how many lives she has touched. And so a gathering could be a few people, some of us on this call together, or it could be a whole ongoing process to support the people who have been influenced or impacted, by Chernobyl or by Fukushima. In the country of Colombia, which has had decades of war, Work That Reconnects workshops are being used to help the National Truth Commission help people deal with each other. There's a new book about her, about Joanna. Can you see this? I really can't see what I'm seeing here. There we go. It's called A Wild Love for the World, Joanna Macy and the Work of Our Time. And it's by Stephanie Kaza as the editor. And this is a 400-page book, and it gives you a little glimpse of the breadth and depth of the Work That Reconnects. Back to us here, not far away across the world, I want to talk about Active Hope. This is the book called Active Hope. It's written by Joanna and Chris Johnstone. The subtitle is How to Face the Mess We're In Without Going Crazy. Timely, huh? So it has several parts, that book, which will be familiar to you already. The Great Turning, Seeing with New Eyes, and Going Forth. So if you want the easiest, most readily accessible manual for how to do that, get a copy of Active Hope or join a book group. Anyway, I'll back to that. There's different kinds of hope. One is the hope that's kind of passive, where we're waiting and waiting and waiting for something to happen, somebody to do something, somebody to make the change. But we are the ones we've been waiting for. So let's get on with it, to Active Hope. And there are 3 steps to Active Hope. First, you take a very clear view of reality, what really is going on. Secondly, you identify what you hope for, or what you want, really want, or what values you'd like to see continued and expressed. And then you take steps to move yourself or the situation in that direction, step by step by step. So it's all about our intention and letting our intention be our guide. Now we can all do this because we all have wishes. We all have intentions. We can do this. And it's about becoming active participants in bringing about what we hope for. Now, I'm sure there's not a single person of the 68 on this screen who isn't already an active participant in bringing about what you hope for. But have you thought of it in terms of putting hope into action? The Great Turning itself is a story of active hope. So locally, what's going on about active hope? Well, Jean has led 1 or 2 book study groups. Is it 2, Jean?
1 so far.
1 so far. And if there's enough demand, she would possibly like to do another one. And so if you have interest in that, contact Jean Gant Delastrada. Lynn Fitzhugh and I have done a couple of trainings, day-long trainings in the work that reconnects. And if we ever are able to be together again live in person, we'll do some more. But meanwhile, Jen and I are running what we call sacred circles. These are sharing circles for people who have had some training or familiarity with Joanna's work. If you are interested in either of those, any of those from me or me and Lynn Fitzhugh, you can contact us. My email is Carolyn, spelled with a Y-N, Carolyn, at planetcare.us. I took that domain name when I was giving lots of climate presentations because, in fact, the care of the planet is up to us. Or you can just ask Jean to pass information along to me, and there'll be information sent out after the conference today, so you'll have some email addresses and so on. So in parting, in finishing up, I want to say, remember to take the gratitude practice with you. If you get nothing else out of this half-hour segment, at least you can remember to be grateful, to focus on gratitude and have it sustain and ground you. I also want to talk about Joanna and her seeing what's ahead now. It's very different than we expected. I never thought that in my lifetime I would see the great unraveling. I never thought that. But here it is all around us, wouldn't you say? And globally. So we are, as she teaches so well, and the link to the video that you saw 7 minutes of will be sent out to you. Isn't that right? Yeah. And if you watch that a little further, you'll hear Joanna talk about bardo, which is a Buddhist term, but it's very much the same concept as liminality, or be in a liminal space. A liminal space is a space in between. The old is gone, the new is unknown. And so here we are in between times without a map. And nothing would be more tragic than to have gone through this global pandemic and not enter new times. We have to go forward into a more life-sustaining society. And she's just filled with ideas about how important that is and how to do that. So stay tuned, and thank you for listening today.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you. One other thing I want to say is that I found out that Active Hope has been revised and the new book is coming out December 8th. So I'm planning to get it and in January consider and send out information about doing a book group for people to read that. I have no idea what will be different, but I'm sure it will be even more current and stronger. So thank you all for hearing our...
Can I say one more thing I forgot, which is Joanna has voluminous writings, including 13 books. This one will make the 14th. And if you're interested in them, go to joannamacy.net and look under publications and videos and things like that. You'll have a treasure trove at your fingertips.
He has a large presence on the net. So thank you, Carolyn. Our next speaker is Reverend Dr. Emma Jordaan-Simpson, who is the Executive Director of FOR USA. And I'm really pleased to have her here and to turn things over to Dr. Jordaan-Simpson for talking with us. There will be a Q&A time with her presentation, so if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, I believe is where we're putting them. Okay.
Well, good afternoon. To you all, it may be good morning, but to me, it's good afternoon here on the East Coast. And I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to see your faces. I've been scrolling through the boxes to see your faces since this shutdown. And we have just been so cut off from people and from each other. Just see these faces in these boxes has brought a bit of joy, and I'm so glad to be with you this morning. I hope I won't take a long time. I want to talk with you about coming to life. I've been most definitely inspired by Joanna Macy, but also by Howard Thurman. And they're both speaking in ears to me. But I first want to, just be very transparent and to begin with a statement of fact for me that it's November 21 and the election results have not been certified by all the states. And we have a president in office who is actively working to undermine the will of the people. That's a statement of fact. And while the results of this election are actually what I did work for, I did not do so because I believed in the Biden and Harris ticket. Millions of people like me, and particularly Black women, but millions of people like me went to the polls not because Biden and Harris arrested our imaginations, and not because they gave us promises to transform our republic, to lead in the work to tackle the evils of racism and poverty and war. And in fact, we know that both Biden and Harris are very likely to continue the kind of politics that ignores the truth of the everyday spiritual violence that characterizes life in America and that we are responsible for exporting across the globe. And it is the kind of life that for many people, it is the foundation of capitalism. It's the reason that capitalism exists. And I went to the polls with my family, my entire family, my 3 children and my 2 children, and my husband. My son voted in New Jersey, but I went to the poll and filled in the little bubble for Biden and Harris, and it was as an act of hope. It's an act of hope. It's in the spirit of what's said in my community, much like, or in the words of Fannie Lou Hamer, when she talked about prayer. And she said, you can pray until you faint, but if you don't get up and do something, God's not going to put it in your lap. And this vote was an act of hope with full knowledge that this was about the continuation of work that we were going to have to do. It's an act of hope also in in what I believe about people. So not what I believe about this ticket, but what I believe about people. This is a clearly flawed democracy, and we are on a fast roll toward fascism. This democracy was downgraded before Trump was elected. This is not something that has happened in the last 4 years. We have been on this road for a while. And the only choice I had was to do what I could do to hold on to the hope of ever having the right to vote again in the future. That's what this vote was about. And that's not really a choice. That's not democracy. That is the effort that many of us took just to stand in the way of what we thought was the apocalypse. Our democratic institutions have experienced an all-out assault over the last 4 years, but not just over the last 4 years. And the truth is they've been taking body blows for a while. And since this administration has almost transformed the national court system with judges with lifetime appointments, the impact of this particular administration's violence is going to be felt for years to come. I don't believe that the challenges we face are Trump deep. They have everything to do rather with what it means to lie to ourselves about our story of origins. How did we get here? And if we think that what we've experienced is just about Trump, then we will work and create in reactionary ways. It's not just about voting or election cycles, but about our ability to see that redeeming America, and I'm not so convinced that we can yet, but the whole idea of redeeming America is about redeeming the idea, winning, creating, evangelizing even the idea of a just, inclusive, multiracial democracy. That there's no way that we can continue if we don't prioritize becoming a just, inclusive, and multiracial democracy. Since I've been with FOR, much of my focus has been on the US, domestic. And the reason for that is because in talking with our national partners, the conversation about the impact of US policy and our behavior on their lives is so real. And their plea to us to go home and get yourselves together. Go home and that's the best thing that we could do for the world, is to go home and get yourselves together. It's not about, the big numbers and when you talk with people around the world about how the way in which the United States shows up and the impact on their personal lives, everything from, their access to clean water to their access to medicine. And so my focus has been on the United States and looking at the United States and trying to be hopeful about the United States. And that means determining to work for transformation, not for reform, but for transformation. And so my hope is not about the vote that I cast or the efforts underway to secure this election or its outcome. It's about, or even the new administration that is forming. My hope is grounded in the reality that I believe our struggle is spiritual. It's a matter of faith. It's a matter of conscience. It can't be reduced to the effort to change laws for the gaining of rights, for civil rights, or laws to change the impact of corporations on the planet. My hope is grounded in the reality that the struggle for fellowship is a spiritual matter. And in the vernacular of my people, just like joy, the world doesn't give it and the world cannot take it away. Repeatedly since 2014, I've heard in response to the demonstrations in support of Black Lives Matter, people have said things like, these activists are making us very uncomfortable. They're stirring up racism and division. They're calling people racist. They're bringing all of this violence. And in the last 6 years in particular, while Trump was a candidate, and then after he was elected, I've heard in response to his policies and in response to the record rise in hate crimes and harassment based on religion and orientation and race, this is not who we are as a country. We need to get back to who we used to be. And depending on who was saying it, to get back to the who we used to be for liberals and progressives, that really was a place where all of this violence was not so visible. For conservatives, it was getting back to a place of negative peace. No resolution and no peace, but at least we have no visible violence. And for those whose perspective of the world was formed by Fox News, and whose sense of grievance then was stoked by Trump, it meant getting back to the time when white supremacy was law. But Howard Thurman taught me that fellowship, that community, that beloved community is not something we have ever had. We have never had the very thing that we want. That's why it's so powerful. We've never had it. It's not something that we've seen or a place that we can get back to. It requires us to imagine together and to work together and to press together to reach for fellowship. And it can't be attained traveling through us and them territory. It's we. It's we. It's the place where people are at peace with themselves, with each other, and with the world, and where our needs have been met in accordance with the abundance of the earth and human spirit. And we cannot reach the beloved community through legislation. We don't gain fellowship through laws. And while this is our work, and we cannot abandon the struggle to create and recreate and tear up and revise the laws that govern us, and be mindful of the impact of our laws on the most vulnerable, even if unintentional, our struggle for fellowship is not legal. Our struggle for the beloved community is not legal. It is a struggle of the spirit. And because of that, I have hope. Because that is the yearning that I believe is in our hearts. Howard Thurman's voice was the voice that Martin Luther King turned to over and over again. It said that he carried a copy of the Constitution and a copy of Howard Thurman's book, Jesus and the Disinherited, with him. Many of the civil rights leaders of Martin Luther King's day carried the U.S. Constitution and Howard Thurman's book, Jesus and the Disinherited, with them. It was Thurman's voice that helped Martin King understand that there can be no social change for good without a revolution of values, right? That there could be no change for good without a humanizing of people. There were no good people and evil people. Like, there's not an us and a them, but a humanizing of all of us. And there could be no change, a social change for good, without the discipline to name evil for what it is. So in the spirit of Joanna Macy's voice and her understanding that we come alive to our truest power when we look straight in the face of our time and participate in the great turning, and Thurman's call to vocation, his call to vocation, rather, is what I have been holding on to in these days since the election. And his call to vocation, I hear it as he says, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. That's our vocation. The way forward is not a program, a tactic, a strategy, but a people who have come alive. And anybody can belong to that people. We are the entire rainbow. We are the entire world. We are across the spectrum of humanity, the people who have come alive. And the people who have come alive are those who keep the world turning for life. So his book is this great little summation of his religious and political thinking. And he argues that understanding the religion of Jesus, not Christianity, there's a difference, right? But the religion of Jesus was to understand Jesus as having a lack of Roman citizenship. And he uses the understanding of Jesus not having Roman citizenship to explore the lives of disenfranchised and disinherited people, Black people, Southern Blacks who lived in the South, who also lacked effective citizenship. In this little book that he moves through the three great evils that are still with us, but the three great evils of social powerlessness. He talks about fear, he talks about deception, and he talks about hate. And then he concludes with this understanding of love that captured the imagination of Martin King and a whole generation, and continues to capture imagination because it certainly has captured mine. He says, for those who stand with their backs against the wall, the way forward was pursuing common humanity with enough forceful, concentrated, and focused, unsentimental love that we could destroy Jim Crow or destroy anything that was destroying life. So why am I talking about, this old book, Jesus and the Disinherited? And why am I talking about religion? I'm talking about it because what you saw at play most visibly in the last 4 years in this election, and what you may have noticed in the way that it has been strategizing for the last 40 years, is the power of religion. It's the power of white Christian supremacy, determined to be the national religion of the United States. Our movement cannot ignore this power of religion. We don't typically talk about it, I think, because we don't necessarily have the skills. We are incredibly polite people, right? What is the rule? At the dinner table, there shall be no conversation about politics or religion, except religion has become politics, and it rules. And our inability to engage and to understand the religion of white Christian supremacy is politics. It leaves us without the tools that we need to work for peace and justice today. It leaves us without the tools that we need to speak truth to power with confidence and to inspire and create change that doesn't leave anybody outside. There's a reason that the framers of the Constitution tried their very best to separate church and state. The reason that they really tried that, the violence that is required to carry out the interests of empire. That's what we get when any religion and the powers of the state and money come together. It's always concentrated and becomes the hammer that hits vulnerable, and expendable people. And we have difficulty in the United States, particularly in polite, nonviolent activist spaces, in talking about the power of America's national religion and its foundations, white Christian supremacy. And because of that, we have a difficulty grasping the truth as lived and experienced by millions of marginalized peoples right here in the United States of America. That is the ongoing violence that characterizes our engagement with the world. So I believe that we have to acknowledge the trauma that we have experienced in these last 4 years. Even those of us who believe that we are the ones that we have been waiting for, we have experienced. This has been traumatic, spiritually traumatic, what we have experienced. And we need to have a space of personal reckoning, a time of personal reckoning, of personal examination, and an interrogation of our own motivations. And after the trauma we've experienced, we need to make a decision. We need to make a decision. We need to decide that we're going to walk and chew gum at the same time. That we're going to show up fully in this moment and in the days ahead and the years ahead, committed to facing truth and to not making just space for truth, but committed to facing truth. Because if we do that, then maybe we can be the alive people who will inspire the building of a road that does lead to fellowship and community. So here's what I'm thinking at Fellowship of Reconciliation, that the work ahead, it looks like making room for and cultivating redemptive imagination, the kind that arises when we commit to the widest circle, the broadest possible we, to build the future we want to see. That means investing in quantity and qualitative relationships, building relationships. There can be no us and we. 71 million people, 74 million people. There has to be one people. It also means that nonviolence cannot become a fetishized strategy only. That it has to be a way of life. And I know that sounds simple to people who have been living this way of life, for decades. But that has to be the thing that we continue to call out in our movement. It has to be a way of life. That when we make it our way of living, and not just the strategy or the tactic we use to change laws or to address conflicts, then we gain a deeper understanding of spiritual violence, of policy violence. And we see the kind of violence that is a part of the lives of our neighbors, the people who are impacted by the ways in which we show up and we govern. And it compels us to hear and see the things that are wounding people right now, the things that are wounding people. And it prevents us from positioning ourselves to be the police for how wounded people cry out, for how wounded people express pain. Real solidarity. And yes, with sister movements and for movements that are working for peace and justice, but also solidarity has to be hyper local. Solidarity has to be hyper local. We have to look outside of our windows. Who are we trying to build relationships with? Who are we trying to hear? Solidarity is hyper local, and the work of hope, creating and building hope, has to be hyper local. There's no way that we can grasp, the national arc if we have not begun to build the strong bonds locally. And so find your local hope and build and imagine and work with people and support it. And then probably one of the most difficult, or I don't know if it's difficult, it's frustrating. We can't with integrity call out something in the world that we're not willing to be ourselves. So we are known as the people who have championed the end to weapons, the end to nuclear weapons. We have called out the spirit of militarism across the globe. That is what the Fellowship of Reconciliation has done. That's what we are known for. At the same time, often we have ignored the militarization of policing in the United States. Right here in the United States. And so the call for abolition of nuclear weapons abroad and the investment in human security through nuclear weapons globally, that has to be grounded in the pursuit of abolition in the United States. It has to be grounded in the commitment to building human and community security in the United States. That's where we are wounding each other. And then the last thing I'll say, and then I will shut up, is that we cannot forget about our family and our friends. One of the most painful conversations I had 2 years ago was with a woman who was so afraid that Nancy Pelosi was going to be in trouble politically because Black women were criticizing a position that she took. And I could not hear. She came to me and, she just had such a fervent, appeal to me to please, don't criticize Nancy Pelosi. And something like just, sort of clicked in me. And I asked her, I said, what are you afraid of? And she was afraid that she was going to lose, that Pelosi and the people that she had invested, that they were going to lose whatever sort of power they had to bring about change. And I asked her, I said, tell me about your family. Well, my family, they voted for Trump. The painful, painful conversation. Because when I said to her, I need you to go home and sit and have tea with your family. I need you to go home and talk with your family. I need you to go home and rehearse your family narrative with your father, with your brother. That's when the real tears came. Because it's everyone else who has to show up in mass numbers to vote. Because we're not doing the work with our own families. That's the biggest fear. But you know what? This is going to be difficult. This is absolutely going to be difficult. And it has very little to do with the election cycle. It has very little to do with voting. It has everything to do with our ability to sit with and hold truth in our most intimate spaces. And if we can't tell each other the truth, in our own families, in our own spaces, how are we going to proclaim that truth and justice to the world? And I believe the work for Fellowship of Reconciliation is creating resources and tools and ways to empower this movement to have those kind of conversations and to do that kind of work, because we are the ones that we've been waiting for. And I know we can do it. So thank you for giving me some time to just talk with you all and to share with you, and for just building the hope that I have. Every conversation I have in this fellowship builds my hope, and I am so grateful for you.
Thank you, Emma. There is one question in the chat I'm going to read to you before we go into breakout rooms, and we will be breaking out into groups of 5 or 6 people to be able to further talk about what Emma had said. And Mary Margaret Pruitt sent a question saying, how does living without enemies guide my communication with my Trump supporting neighbors?
Say that again?
How does living without enemies guide my communication with my Trump supporting neighbors?
When you don't see people as enemies, and this is a very difficult issue, because we're not talking about like theoretical people. We're not talking about folks who just voted for theoretical things that I don't like, right? But we're talking about people who have supported policies that have ripped families apart, and people feel the impact, of that. And so if I am someone whose family has been ripped apart by these policies, wow, how difficult is it to go and have a conversation with our neighbors? And we have to have compassion for that, because what we have basically done is required those who have been harmed to be the ones to save democracy. So let's just begin with an incredible, prayer, wish, hope, building of compassion for each other. But if you don't see someone as your enemy, the work to come to build relationship, to enter into a relationship, to come to understanding, a huge barrier is removed from that incredible challenge. That if I see you as someone that I want to be in relationship with, if I see you as valuable, if I see what you can contribute to the way forward as being so incredibly important to the way forward, I believe that it will happen. I believe that we are creative enough to figure out a way to make it happen. It's not going to happen by magic. It's certainly not going to happen just by persistence. We do need to have skills. We need to invest in skills to have difficult conversation. One of the tools that we're looking at the Fellowship of Reconciliation is this thing called People Supper, which we wanted to sort of share that with all of you all before the pandemic began, because the tool is a people supper. It's inviting the people in your community to supper. That's where relationships are built. You can have difficult conversations, guided, and understanding that the work is not just one, coffee and piece of apple pie, but that it is the commitment to build, to keep building. And this is not going to happen. What in this election season didn't happen, what happened in the last 4 years wasn't the result of one election season. This has been years in the making. And so the difficult thing for us to understand is that the unmaking of this and the moving in a new direction is not going to happen in one election season or by Friday at 5 o'clock. That it has to be the commitment of our way forward, in a way forward that doesn't position us as elite activists over in a corner, but positions us as people of love and grace, committed to being in fellowship, in community with people. So.
Thank you, Emma. We unfortunately have to continue to move on, and we are going to break into small groups of 5 to 6 people. And you will see a link that you will need to click on. And as Jean mentioned earlier, don't leave the room because you won't get back in. And I'm going to go ahead and start this, and it's for about 20 minutes. And I know there were a couple other questions, and maybe you can bring your questions into the chat and talk, not to the chat, but into the breakout rooms and talk about it further. And Emma's done a wonderful presentation, and I wish she could keep talking all day.
Thank you all.
You have a cold. Bill is both an activist and an artist and calls himself a radical solutionary. He co-founded the Backbone campaign in 2004 and has produced hundreds of creative nonviolent protests since then in the Seattle area. And let's see what ideas he has for us today.
All right, everybody, hello. Good morning. Backbone Campaign's done stuff around the country, and I just actually got back from DC where we were supporting the Green New Deal action at the DNC. I thought it might be fun to just show you some pictures as way of introduction, if that's all right. From that effort this last few days, there was an occupation for 24 hours out in front of the Democratic National Convention. Some of you might have seen it in social media and such. That you'll see in the background, there's that banner, that fancy banner. And I don't know if Rod Tharp is with us today or not, but I shout out to all the folks who build stuff for Backbone Campaign. We have something called the Builders Guild. Though they've been hampered by COVID, their work lives on in everything we do. So I thought it would just be fun to show you in ways that we get to show up just recently. So we're in front of the Democratic National Convention, National Committee headquarters. And there's a coalition of climate action, climate activists, organizers from around the country fighting for the Green New Deal. The squad ended up showing up and speaking, AOC and others. I actually missed a lot of that because I was running around getting ready for the projection part. So we did projections as well onto the DNC. So this is sort of what Backbone Campaign is kind of known for, sort of creative efforts, creative tactics. So I wanted to today speak a little bit about touch on a few different things that are on my mind lately. One is actually some of the limits of activism. Another is what's really entailed in regards to the scale of social transformation that we're looking for. And the third is how do we do that in a way that is where we actually make progress in given the deep challenges and divisions in our country? So you see, this is a valuable kind of activism about, the creativity, etc. But one of the things that I struggle with personally around the concept of activism is its limits. Activism is very much often trying to convince other people to think the way we do. And I think that nobody likes to be told how to think, and we can do this in ways that are creative, that are compelling, that create that draw people to the cause, that draw people in who already kind of agree and activate them to increase the moral power of our movement. We can create moral conundrums that force people to choose this thing or that, this direction or that direction. We can model that vulnerability and our values and our vision in ways that increase its enrolling power for the society. But I think we kind of, in a moment like this, we may be hitting a limit on the capacity of activism. And it's not that we need to stop doing our activism, but I think we need to consider a non-transactional form of engagement, of being a change agency. And by what I mean by non-transactional is that we're not trying to convince people. We don't go in with a frame that we're correct and they're wrong and we need them to come to our side. So I think that is the world of organizing, of true organizing, non-transactional organizing, organizing that is that it's about deep listening. So one of the things that was revealed, I think, in the recent election was that the divide we experience is not so much a red state, blue state divide, but perhaps more of one of the divisions is an urban-rural divide. So I think that we really should pay attention to that. And we're not going to accomplish building solidarity in those places, in rural places, through what we'd call activism, right? So how do we, I think this is one of our biggest challenges. How do we engage with other places, rural places, with people who who disagree with us on practically everything, in a way that that sows the seeds of future transformation? I had the opportunity through our project, the Solutionary Rail Project, which some of you are probably familiar with, but if you're not, you could go to solutionaryrail.org/video, and you'll watch a little video about it, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But I love railroads. I love the fact that that they literally and figuratively connect us all, and that everybody has a story about the railroads and their family, and every community has a history. Almost every community has a history that's connected in some way to the railroads. So I think that's an exciting project, but also just a vehicle, in a way, figuratively vehicle for having those conversations. But I just want to mainly share an outcome of a conversation that I had. I was talking with the former head of the Kansas State Grange. He has a business that provides equipment to local short line railroads. And through that conversation, he multiple times we would veer into the territory of coal and our differences, the wedge issues that separate us, but when we kept bringing it back to something that we could investigate together, we, in a way, it de-escalated and diffused the topics that were programmed in us to divide us, and it enabled us to consider how would we solve problems together. He said something at the end of our conversation that I think is worth repeating, and I have repeated it many, many times, and that is that every person, he said, I truly believe, he said, that every person deserves and desires the opportunity to think outside the box. Every person deserves and desires the opportunity to think outside the box. To me, that's an affirmation of our fundamental human capacity for creativity. And the idea that what he was getting from our conversation is that the solutionary rail that he and I were engaged, and the conversation he and I were engaged in was principally about how do we solve problems together. And to me, unless we get to that place in our engagement, we're not going to solve problems together. We're not going to build relationships. Social movement, and if those of you who have been lucky or unlucky enough to have listened to other presentations by me about grand strategy, you know that I talk. There's a framework that actually comes from the Pentagon, Colonel John R. Boyd and my mentor Chuck Spinney. But there's a framework that says, it's basically an evolution of the study of conflict, and so it uses terminology that maybe we're not all comfortable with in nonviolent social movement, but I think it's valuable nonetheless. And that there are three domains of conflict. There's attrition conflict, where it's about brute force, and whoever has the most brute force or money wins. There is maneuver conflict, where you test and probe, you find opportunities to break into space. Sometimes it's because you surprise, you use creativity, you use tactics like I showed you before. And you to express your values and your vision, to enroll people to your cause. And then there is the realm of moral conflict, where we're fundamentally appealing to the aspirations and values of people, and enrolling people into a common cause, a sense of common cause. And that's fundamentally where we operate as nonviolent social movement, in that realm. And that power in that is really moral power. And moral power is relational. So when we come to the others, just some ideas from grand strategy, that framework is that the fundament, what makes something strategic or not strategic, is whether it expands your alliances, increases the cohesion amongst allies, and deepens the resolve of people. Deepens the resolve of people in that they feel like their actions are an expression of their deepest aspirations and values. So that's relational to self, that's relational to our colleagues and cohorts and allies and friends, and it's relational across sectors in society that we need sort of on board to do the work that we're challenged to do. we need that. Because the work we're challenged to do is massive work. It's not about a political party, getting a particular party in office. It's about transforming the social contract. And that's why I like the Green New Deal as an effort, if nothing else, in that it's starting to connect the dots. And I like the connecting the dots part. But I'd like to say again why I think that it's so important that we take the time to slow down the way we do our work, or shift the way we think about doing our work. And that's because the challenge that we're facing, again, is not about who has the White House or the Senate. We live in a society where the national religion is capitalism. And the fact that, and we need to really understand that inequality in capitalism, the religion of capitalism, inequality is not a mistake. Inequality is a sacrament, because it's a worldview that says it's a proof. It affirms the Calvinist understanding that because of predestination, when one cannot know, but one can see signs of whether one is part of the elect, or by one's station in life, etc., that all of a sudden the difference between your station and your material well-being is and someone else's is what makes you spiritually superior, or like going to heaven, or saved, or whatever. So that's deeply within the DNA of this system. And so that's very, very, very difficult to change. But unless we understand what we're really up against, that we are up against a national religion of capitalism, and with sacrament, the inequality is a sacrament, I don't think we're going to be able to do the kind of work that is adequately transformational. The other thing I would like to do is bring us back to the idea that everybody deserves and desires the opportunity to think outside the box. We're in a moment where there is no box. Right? The walls of the box have fallen down. So any kind of false pragmatism, any impulse or urge to limit your imaginative capacity to solve problems together, to preserve some sense of normalcy. There's no normal anymore. We have to let go of the old normal. This is the time for deep imagining and deep listening. It's not, I don't think, and then coming back to this idea of the limits of activism. So the limits of activism is when to the extent that activism impedes our capacity to listen and build relationship, it is not strategic for us. So someone told me one time, show, don't tell. So I would like us to consider in our work as agents of change, how do we show rather than tell? I was at a checkout stand in the local grocery store, and a friend who works there walked me out the door afterwards. He says, "This is the time, Bill. This is the time you get your electric train." Not that this is necessarily. I don't know how we do this. Let's just say that you get your train, you do your whistle stop tour, and you do free healthcare clinics. You know, what he was really saying is you make a material difference in people's lives. You don't go out there and you don't tell people what to think. You don't tell them how important it is to have Medicare for all. you go and provide health care, access to health care. I'm sure there are lots of ways of doing it. I also think that probably that sort of whistle-stop tours would really be about listening. And it would be about the fix-it cafes and time banks and harnessing and celebrating people's capacity to teach and to share and to solve problems together. The fundamental assumption in capitalism is that we are all separate and that our salvation is an experience of the individual. And the absolute opposite of that, the fundamental value of what I believe is the paradigm, a life-affirming paradigm, is that salvation has nothing to do with the individual, really. The salvation is about the broadest, in the community in the broadest sense, in place. Yes, I do. Sorry, my wife was wondering where our dog is, and the dog finally decided to come into the cabin and sleep by the fire. So she was wondering, where the hell is our dog? Where's Milo? Okay, I think, isn't that a book? Where's Milo? Anyway, so back to the serious stuff. So in our activism, let's show, don't tell. Let's invest in listening and in solving problems together. And I think that means in community organizing. We have this concept of community-supported organizers. I think autonomous organizers who are not in a transactional, convincing type relationship, but who are based in communities, but nationally and also globally networked, are very important for us to invest in right now. I think we have to connect the dots on the issues that we care about and get back to the fundamental problems. Oh, that's what we're going on. The fundamental value of our system is that the salvation is not about the individual. It's about the community in place over time. That our survival together over time with obligations to past and future generations is the exact opposite of the atomization, the fragmentation, the alienating, Calvinist, capitalist perspective on reality. So we don't get to enroll people into a movement by telling them they're wrong about things, but by demonstrating how we are going to move forward together. The last thing I'd like to say about all of this is that, so I believe that localization is very, very important, and that our power and relational power and moral power for transformational movement is based in local experience, because that's where the deepest relationships happen. Because our, if you will, opposing worldview rather than enemy, our opposing worldview, the paradigm of the individual capitalism is no longer a thing about nationalism. It's no longer based in the nation state. So solutions that we try to come up with that are simply based in the nation state are always going to disappoint us. They are going to be inadequate for the challenges that we face. We have to be not just locally based, community based, but we also have to be not just nationally networked, but I think we need to be globally networked. So I think that there's an aspect of localization of economies, of democracy, of et cetera, of participatory self-determination that we need to find ways to affirm through our organizing. And simultaneously, we need to be in solidarity and in a learning and listening relationship with people around the globe who are also challenged by the power of transnational capitalism and it's the way that it manifests, and because it is transcending the state, and most of our defense mechanisms for dealing with this are are based in the nation state currently, and that's going to be really challenging for us. So one of the things I think we should be pushing when we come into this next administration, for instance, is I'm sure that they're going to try to resurrect the Trans-Pacific Partnership. The neoliberal model embraces that. Progressives were the key force to shut it down before Trump jumped on the bandwagon to try to grab a bit of the populist mantle. But that, the reason I bring that up is because I think that if we're thinking about a locally community-based but nationally and globally networked, we need to have national and global standards for exchange, for protection of the planet and protection of people. So I know that covered a bit of ground, and I hope that there's now, if we could take some moments for discussion to see if there's something that I could clarify. I would welcome that opportunity. So every person deserves and desires the opportunity to think outside the box. We all deserve to solve problems together. We are to protect our planet and to repair relationships. We have to invest in listening, and I think we have to be grounded in an understanding that this is fundamentally a spiritual conflict, a spiritual struggle that must be fought from a place of love. And love is fundamentally about connection and relationship, and thus listening. So I'm going to end with that and then open to questions. Thank you.
So, Fred, do you want to get the questions from the chat? We're just starting to get, we have one.
Yeah, I don't see any particular questions at this time. Of course, if anybody's got a hot burning, you can speak, unmute yourself and speak, and you will be the center of attention, but we have a very limited time for that. So,
well, I'm going to start with addressing Elaine's point, because I think that maybe I was not adequately clear that the reason there's the walls of the box have fallen down apart away, and there's no box is exactly because of COVID. She said, COVID is the crisis of the moment. How would you apply your comments to it? I think COVID is what allows us to release all constraints of false pragmatism and appeal to people's deepest level of creativity, as well as seek engaged healing conversations with people at their deepest areas of value and vision. Elaine, I'm not sure if that's adequate, but I think that also I would say that the relationship between that and this idea of transnational capitalism, et cetera, and why are we seeing this global pandemic of negative populism is because people have been left behind by globalization, and we need to understand that and in deeply, and we need to challenge that trajectory by showing and not telling an alternative.
So Joshua has a question in the chat. It seems to me many, if not most, activists are not involved in the community that supports their values and activism.
Yeah, and so I want to build on what Joshua was saying there. And one experience I had a few years ago in 2016, when we were organizing the Break Free from Fossil Fuels actions up near on Swinomish land, that I went in front of the Swinomish Tribal Council to ask for their endorsement of this the action. And even though I grew up on Swinomish, when I was in grade school, my dad worked for the tribe, so I have some relationships there. I was not able to get an endorsement. And I'll tell you the reason why I believe is that in a place, the Swinomish tribe has less than 1,000 enrolled members, and yet they have survived, not just survived, but they have thrived and provided leadership in the Pacific Northwest and nationally for Indigenous people over my entire lifetime. And part of the reason for that is exactly what it points to the challenges and the problems with just activism that is not grounded in community. When you live in a community and you need each other to survive, you do not escalate for the sake of escalation. And that is something that we see within activism, is an escalation for the sake of escalation by people who are not grounded or accountable to communities. And that creates giant problems, rifts, and okay. Yeah. All right.
And then Bahar has a question. Bahar, do you want to unmute and say your question? Or I could read it.
Sure. So I was just asking, in terms of like the climate crisis, how will non-transactional activism make sure we're still getting work done as fast as possible?
Great question. This I heard this story about the Zen master who was sitting in the people came in. They said, "Master, the enemy is at the gate. It is a disaster." And I'm telling the story wrong, but he's like, "The enemy is at the gate. The disaster is imminent. We must act slowly." So I think it's about taking the care that we need to do things to do no harm. Because we could keep doing what we think is activism and not be getting any closer to solving the problem. So I think that acting from a place that is very grounded, is accountable to community, that is listening and trying to get through get past calling people names, that is not going to win. There's something I think I would like to explore sometime. I think we should all be thinking about more, is like, what's the difference between being and doing, in a way, because sometimes there's this phrase called virtue signaling, where we're getting, rather than being virtuous, we take on the badges of virtue and to lift up ourselves, which is basically just a form of individualism. So we need to be very careful about that stuff. We need to stop doing things that just put us above other people, because that is just another expression of, in a way, some capitalist bullshit. So, and part of the paradigm of separateness. And I think that the listening is something that's very important. Bahar, I don't think that's totally adequate, but but personally, that's why I love things like Solutionary Rail. Sure.
Great. We are just about out of time, so I think we'll thank you, Bill, for this. This was very thought-provoking and helpful for me and probably for others. And thank you very much. I appreciate your being with us. Thank
you. It's an honor. Yeah. I really appreciate the invitation, y'all. You are for generations leaders in nonviolent social change. So thank you for that leadership, and it's an honor to be invited to speak with you in this particularly pivotal moment. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and thank you for speaking to the moment, which definitely you did. Yeah. Our next few minutes before the lunch breakouts is going to be responding to the present time, and our speaker was unavailable to do that, and so Joanne Dufour has agreed to start off using a few minutes of that 15 minutes to talk about news in concerning the nuclear weapons treaty And I'll let her give the news to people who haven't heard it, but it's definitely a hopeful step for our world. And then after that, we have 7 or 8 minutes if you would like to talk about your issue, particularly climate change, racial justice, immigration, issue that we haven't talked about. We've talked a lot about process, and would like to hear updates, sort of, not exactly announcements, but updates. So if you would like to do that, please put your name in the chat, and then after Joanne speaks, we'll unmute you and call on you. Okay, so Joanne, are you with us? Joanne. There she is. She needs to be unmuted. Yeah. I don't know. Ask to unmute.
Okay. First of all, I wanted to thank Jean for allowing me to fill in the speaker who couldn't perform right now. But I wanted to start off by asking you, how many of you are familiar with the treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons? Can I see a show of hands here? Okay, and I'm just kind of, okay. So we're good. We have an audience that can be stimulated. Well, let me announce to you that we're all familiar with the fact that it's 75 years ago since we experienced Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Interestingly enough, on September 15th, right after that August 6th date, the International Committee of the Red Cross announced that it was absolutely obligatory that nuclear weapons be banned and prohibited. And they were one of the first voices so soon, 3 weeks after that detonation, to say that the effects of nuclear weapons are so disastrous that we have to eliminate them. That message has been repeated over the 70 years again and again and again and again, while up to now 9 countries have decided, no, that's the way to go. You know, first it was our 5 powers that did it, right? Our 5 nuclear, well, our 5 folks in the Security Council who have the veto, they all acquired the weapon, and then it expanded to 4 more additional countries as Israel and India and Pakistan and now North Korea have come on board. So even though there were voices to abolish nuclear weapons, that's not what happened. And even when treaties to limit nuclear weapons, like the famous Non-Proliferation Treaty that is celebrating its 70th birthday, I believe. No, it's a little bit less than that, 50th birthday? Well, anyway, I do have 2 companions on board that can correct me if I need to be corrected. Anyway, every time they made a treaty, they always put some kind of provision that really disarmament is the ultimate goal. We'll tolerate the fact that we are using and are counting on and making sure that we have deterrence because we have the weapons, but really we don't want to go down that road. And we promise you we will dismantle our weapons. Well, we haven't. And eventually the countries that were sitting by, especially when the Non-Proliferation Treaty would have its meetings to say, well, how are we doing? Like in 2010, there were voices that said, you know, we really ought to abolish these things. And those voices started to grow. And especially there was one non-governmental organization that said, you know, if we brought these voices together, maybe it's not just 40 people in 2010, 40 countries that are saying we ought to abolish it. Maybe there are more voices out there. Well, there were. And we credit the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons for having the guts to bring together those countries that said, you know, we really don't like these weapons. We might say that we need the big power countries to protect us, but you know, those weapons, if they go off, we're going to be doomed. We don't have any voice about it. I mean, the explosion of a nuclear weapon and the deleterious effects that come even from now smaller weapons is enough to destroy the world. We're not buying that. So they started to organize the countries at the General Assembly to meet. And they met in 2013 and 2014 and 2015, and the numbers started to grow. By 2016, there were about 125 countries or so, including North Korea, that said, you know, I think we ought to write a treaty to abolish nuclear weapons. And, well, there was consensus. Of course, all of those particular meetings, and remember, this International Committee to Abolish Nuclear Weapons was organizing those meetings. And all of the meetings were boycotted by the countries that had the weapons. Well, you know, that wasn't such a bad thing, because when they finally decided to write this treaty, none of the nuclear powers took part. So they couldn't say, no, change those words. Oh, no, we want the phrase this way. Okay. So the treaty now is going to include the obligation that any country that signs the treaty cannot engage in the development, production, testing, acquisition, stockpiling, transfer, deployment, use, and threat of use of nuclear weapons, as well as assisting, financing, encouraging, inducing others to carry out any of these prohibited actions. Well, now that's pretty broad. You know, you can't even almost talk about nuclear weapons, right? If you sign the treaty. Oh my gosh, the worst thing that you could possibly do, said all the nuclear powers. I mean, this is the way that the world has to be. We need these weapons because they deter use of other weapons. Look at how successful. Nobody has used a weapon since that time because we have them all. So we ought to modernize them and make them better and faster. And that's exactly what's been happening. And so while we sit back and say, well, yeah, I thought we took care of that. You know, we used to have a whole lot back in the 80s, and then we had, you know, the freeze movement, and it worked, and the 80,000 are now down to 14. Haven't we solved that problem? Well, on the contrary. And instead, the world has said, no, the powers have moved along, and now we have, not only did ICANN get the Nobel Prize in 2017, but the conditions for a treaty to come into effect was when 50 countries signed on. On the 70th anniversary of the United Nations, back on October 24th, Honduras, right after Nauru and Belize came on board, 50 countries ratified the treaty, and it will come into effect on January 22nd. Now, why is that important? Because they are illegal. Now, what difference does that make? Well, it means that those 50 countries have to follow all the stipulations that I read to you. But there were 122 countries that were supporting this. Those are just the tip of the iceberg. And those of us who are working to try to spread this news, and I share the, as part of the Olympia Coalition to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, I would like to share the forum with James Manista and Mark Fleming, who are with us today, we have started a course, and we're into the 5th round of the course. And so I just wanted to read to you what some of the things you can do, but I think I might be going over time, but just let me let you know. We're trying to build up another a million person march like we had in 1982, but this time talking about nuclear weapons. It's the second existential threat to the climate. So when you talk about climate, please add on nuclear weapons. We need it. We can eliminate $23 billion a year just from our budget. And think of the implication that would have for COVID if we just raise that. And that's only for the United States, because all the other nations are overspending for nuclear weapons as well. So would you please talk to everyone, ask them, do you know that the nuclear weapons are now illegal? Well, you have to ask it after January 22nd, you have to say now illegal, or are going to be illegal after January 22nd, just to raise consciousness of the issue. Look for finances, because ICANN has a marvelous website. Look for finances to divest. Ask your banker, how is my money being invested? You know, am I really supporting Boeing? Am I really supporting all the powers that are making nuclear weapons? I don't want to do that anymore. And that's one of the things that ICANN has been encouraging. You can make posters, and they would love us to make posters. We want to celebrate January 22nd. It is a day that has been so many good people have been working for that day for ages. We really need a huge party to celebrate. And just as Emma had said in her speech, if you join people who have come alive, honest to God, people who have been working this are alive and energized and excited because we've been waiting for this for so long. And we want that 50 number to go up to at least 120. We'd love it to be 193 and have all the nations of the world sign on it and actually eliminate those weapons. So you can certainly join us at the Olympia Coalition to Ban Nuclear Weapons. You could take our course, which would be lovely. We're going to do it for the 5th time, and it's a free course. It's online. We're going to do it for the 5th time starting January 12th. You can write your legislators. We can get our city councils, because there are 300 cities around the world that support this. There are a number of countries that are working on, even NATO countries, that are working on saying, do we really want to store those doggone things? They could go off. They really could go off. And especially since all of the countries are trying to improve them to make them not bigger, but better, which means horrible. And the threat of using the smaller weapons is terrible. We can go down the road of customary law, but I don't think I have the time to be able to explain that, because I know that Jean would like us to hear from some other people. So I would be more than happy to share a little bit more information. You'll hear in our panel a marvelous presentation by a young woman who's going to come back to this topic. And so stay tuned for 12:25 on our youth panel.
Thank you, Joanne. Well, nobody has said in the chat that they want to talk about climate, which I think is the other big issue that we maybe need to have this march about. And I think there are people here who could speak to that. I'm sorry we didn't get it together to have them present it this time, but I think we'll go on to our next event, part of the event, which is a song from Holly Gwinn Graham, our longtime singer, player, entertainer from Olympia, who will sing us a song, and then we will go back to our breakout rooms for lunch. And you can, this is to give you some people to talk to, like you're sitting around a table, you bring your own lunch and talk if you want. And if you need the time personally, mute yourself and turn off the video, and we'll be fine with that. Your other people will be fine with that. And then we'll come back at 12:45 to the main presentation after the afternoon.
And Jean, people will be going back to the same groups they were before in most cases, unless they join later.
Right.
I'm reminding folks to go to speaker view rather than gallery view when we have performers on.
Yeah, and we really see her.
If you said back at 12:45, that's the wrong time. That's too late.
That's true. It's 11:45. You're right. Thank you, Carolyn. Holly.
Hi, everybody. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you, Jean, for asking me to be with you. I wrote this song in 2005 for a March for Abolition Now, which was in New York City, and I sang it at Central Park. Bill Moyer, a shout out to you. I lived on Swinomish for 13 years on Pullenby Dam Road, and we did many peace events together, including stopping a nuclear power plant from being built on the wild and scenic Skagit River. So shout out to you, Bill, and I love my friends on the res, and we're still in touch. By the way, Hibakusha are the survivors of the nuclear holocaust in Hiroshima and Nagasaki 70 years ago. We gather here to turn the page, to say farewell to the nuclear age, to the hate and fear, to the mushroom cloud. Our will is this, abolition now, 'cause we need to heal, to let love in. Peace is the way, so let's begin. It's all one sky under the sun, and it's time we learn to live as one. The Hibakusha who live in pain, oh, we promise them never again. No Star Wars race to arm the skies. Missile defense is smoke and lies. We work to end the fog of war. We won't forget what we're here for life on earth, for life to come. We'll find the way to live as one. The spear of war, here comes the plow. Our will is this, abolition now. Our will is this, abolition now.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. So, Patty, going to put us into groups now. Back to our groups. Have a good lunch.
There you go. So this song is called Rainbow Path, and I wrote it during the Reagan administration. Oh my goodness, which accounts for the reference to jelly beans. And playing with me is my hunk of burning friendship, Darian Brown on harmonica. He doesn't want to be on camera, so you'll have to imagine a handsome bearded man and a little cap.
So that's where the harmonica comes from. You're not.
That's not from, yeah, thank you, Jean. Not from heaven, but from an actual person sitting near me. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a world that's filled with refugees. Some would feed them all on jelly beans, and a diet made of candy filled with poison and deadly lies. Time is coming once again as we make that old decision to accept our own humanity or ignore the other's crimes. Because we have this opportunity to be healing earth in harmony, to be planning life as it might shine. In a future we can build. We need a vision true and strong. We need a hope that's good and long. It's got to carry us through the prison trials to the time all cups are filled. All cups are filled. So if you can hear the music and the synth symphony of the spheres and see the magic here. Not to be, you know you're on the path. Turn your back on all deceit with the faith that heartbreak can't defeat, and though sorrow may touch your life, you remember how to laugh. Keep on laughing. It's good for the soul. It's good for the soul. Then take the hands of those who reach for you and let the changes come. As changes do, and we're gonna roll with currents like the sea. Remember who we are. We're gonna take a step beyond our differences to the place where one is how it is. The circle lives, grows and strengthens, holds us near and far. Oh yeah, we're all connected. We're all connected. Near and far. Shining wings, spirit lifts us up on. Truth we've known for ages, decades. Let it be remembered now. Let that ancient truth be told. Cause now's the time to hear the calling. Catch those near you who are falling for now. On the wings of healing far from thought and soul. It's the pathway. I remember to the real and eternal pot of gold. Put it out there. What is that pot of gold? Love is the pot of gold. What is it, Darian? Tell me. Love is the pot of gold. Is Dr. Karen Johnson, or known as Dr. J. She does expert level equity and social justice consultations in government, nonprofit governments, and faith-based markets, and is a leader in leadership and self-care workshops across the nation. She is a champion in working unapologetically to help others embrace and emulate and embed their own part in a culture where everyone commits to collectively value, include, hear, and respect each other so that individually and in an organizational sense, we realize excellence. Occupational therapy is one of her backgrounds, public administration, doctorate in urban services. And as she says, I will work toward liberty and justice for all until justice rolls down as water. Those are fine words. And so, with a great deal of honor, I introduce to you Dr. Karen A. Johnson.
Greetings, everyone. Buenas tardes. Shalom. I'm after lunch today, so I won't be long before you. But first, let me just acknowledge that we are meeting. I am sitting on the colonized land known as Thurston County, which has been the recorded homes of indigenous people for about 1,000 years. And I want to recognize the presence of the sovereign nation lands on whom I now sit. And these sovereigns today continue through the strength, resilience, and courage of their ancestors for the next 7 generations and beyond. I must tell you, when Sandra invited me to join you today, and it's so good to be back with you, and told me that this year's theme is what's next, I immediately said, oh, then I'm going to talk about Are You Next? But I must admit, after listening to Reverend Dr. Emma Jordaan-Simpson this morning, and the words of Bill Moyer, and the songs of Holly, I really have no idea what's going to happen in our time together. But I do know this, that this is an appointed time, a kairos moment. And everyone at the sound of my voice is here for such a time as this. I was awakened at 3 o'clock this morning, and all I kept hearing was James Reeb. You remember Reverend James Reeb? He was murdered while attending this march on Selma. He was a Unitarian Universalist minister who worked with poor people in Boston. And although he was married and had 4 children, he answered the call of the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. for clergy to come to Selma, Alabama, to protest violence by state troopers against civil rights marchers. He, of course, was murdered March 9th, Bloody Sunday, and we just lost the late, great John Lewis, right? You've seen all of these pictures, I'm sure. And I was going to ask, are you next? Are you willing to lose your life for what you say you stand for? Reverend Dr. Emma Jordaan-Simpson said that nonviolence is not a strategy, it is a way of life. Reverend Reed was minding his own business. He and 2 other ministers, they were walking back after dinner meeting with Dr. King, and they were attacked by a group of white men. One hit Reverend Reed in the head with a club, and it was fatal. He died on March 11th, 1965. And even though a Black man, Jimmy Lee Jackson, had been killed 2 weeks earlier in Selma, nobody knew anything about that, did not draw any national attention. But Reverend Reed's murder did. And it was also credited with helping to hasten the passage of the Federal Voting Rights Act. Now, and I was also going to talk about Viola. You all remember Viola, who was murdered in one of her freedom marches. White woman who left her family in Detroit to go down to help Black people to register to vote, called everything other than a child of God. FBI was even involved in that case. But I'm not going to talk about that. I was going to ask, are you next? Are you, like Viola, willing to leave your family and your loved ones to die at the hands of white people for simply helping Black people or other people to vote? But I'm not going to talk about that today in the time that's afforded me, because as friends of in the fellowship, this is a fellowship of reconciliation. In listening today, I thought, reconciliation, that implies that conciliation occurred. To be reconciled implies that one was first conciled. And I would be absolutely remiss if I did not remind everyone that, contrary to popular belief, Black American descendants of kings and queens who were brought from Africa and enslaved in this land were not voluntary immigrants here, for the record. And when the European colonizers got to this land in 1619, they first decided to commit genocide against the indigenous people. What did Bill call? He talked about transnational capitalism. Rape the women, kill the children, stole their land. And by the way, these are the people who helped them to make it through that first little winter that they had here. I wonder if the indigenous people regret ever helping the European colonizers to live so that they can then commit genocide against them. But nevertheless, the genocide was committed in the name of, well, they were a different race. So when it came time to bring the Black or the African kings and queens from Africa over here and enslave them, they created the concept of whiteness and white supremacy. The Reverend Dr. She referred to it as, talks about white Christian supremacy is politics. Created whiteness and white supremacy. I'm not talking about people who wore hoods. who wear hoods today, and developed racial hierarchy so that they could reinforce chattel slavery that allowed another human being to buy, sell, own another human being, that made slavery racial, hereditary, right, and permanent. And so we see, and right there, that we basically are living a lie. Race is a social construct. This whole hierarchy was created. What did the Reverend say? She's talked about many Black people have a constitution. Oh, absolutely. I do not leave home without it. Not to be confused with an American Express card. I do not leave home without it. Because in this document, it says that all men, mankind, are created equal by their creator, endowed with certain unalienable rights. And among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so if indeed that is true, then that means that no one is either superior or inferior to me, or can make me inferior or even superior to them based on the amount of melanin in my earth suit. Now, I think I heard that there are about 60 people on the line, and I'd ask you to ask yourself, did anybody ask you what kind of earth suit you wanted to wear to walk planet Earth? Just think about that. Did anybody ask you what earth suit you wanted to wear to walk planet Earth? Now, nobody asked me. Now, I probably certainly would have said, oh, absolutely, I absolutely want to be a lovely chocolate brown queen of African descent. I probably would have chosen this as my earth suit, but nobody asked me. So how then do we even have the audacity to believe that a people or a group of people are superior or inferior to another group of people? But nevertheless, that's what happened. And so melanin, color, equal slave, equal inferior, dehumanized, criminalized, and vilified, such that today, in the 21st century, we now have what's called the new Jim Crow, the modern day slavery. Even though President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation a couple hundred years ago, 1863, that freed the slaves, except for imprisonment, right? And so now, today, we see Black and brown people enslaved. I thought slavery was over. I thought that ended with the 13th Amendment. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. This whole system of racial hierarchy was embedded through every fabric in society, such from the bathrooms to where you could go to church. 11 o'clock Sunday morning was the most segregated hour of the week. I wonder if that's still true today. I don't know. I haven't done my research. But when I was thinking about the fellowship of reconciliation, I'm like, well, how then do we come together as people to, what did Holly sing? Oh, Bill said, so to solve problems together. To find, Holly saying, finding a way to live as one. Love is the pot of gold. How do we do this without first telling the truth and acknowledging the atrocities that have been committed against humanity? Owning that, acknowledging that, asking for forgiveness, repenting of our act. See, this is why we have to have a conversation about nuclear weapons. How are we going to talk about Nuclear weapons, oh, that means obviously that somebody doesn't value the life of someone, that they have to have a weapon to destroy not only humanity, but all of society. Really? What did she say? Back to the good Reverend. Three evils, triple evils: fear, deception, and hate. Right? I'm fully convinced that our whole narrative around climate change and global warming is just an outward manifestation of the hatred that we have in our hearts for one another. I believe that the planet and the trees and nature is trying to say, people, stop killing us. Stop killing yourselves. Pay attention. Get rid of the hate. Get rid of the fear. Get rid of the deception. On your website, it talks about we are encouraging our WWFOR community to join local efforts for learning more about U.S. history. I thought I'd just take a moment to give some today. Institutional racism, I'm just taking a few minutes to give examples of that today. White privilege and what it means to be a white ally. Well, let's talk about white privilege and what that means. What that really means is you're the privilege to live. You have the privilege to go into the grocery store or even shopping and nobody follow you around. You have the privilege to walk down the street and not encounter fear from another white person that they pull out a gun and shoot you, or to put their D on your neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds with their hand in their pocket, staring straight into a video camera with a smirk on their face as if to say, can't touch this. And you're the law enforcement. That's what white privilege grants, the ability to live. And yet, according to this document, it was our Creator who endowed us with unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, in 3 o'clock has been a long time. I'm almost finished here. I read this story this morning. It's 12:04. I have until 12:20. I have a few minutes. I have a few minutes.
Oh, you have longer than that, I think.
There's a story I found from the Washington Post, dated December 15th, 2017, that I want to share with you. This is all about Are You Next? Because we are the ones we're waiting for. You are the ones we're waiting for. Are you really? And that's not really a rhetorical question. I really want everyone at the sound of my voice to answer that for themselves, because if indeed you think what we're dealing with right now is just some off, this is not our values, you're absolutely wrong. Because 4 years ago, if I were a betting woman, I'd be rich. When I told all my friends, oh, of course this man gonna win. Oh, didn't y'all learn the lesson when the African-American man beat the woman? That testosterone trumped that little melanin he had in his body. Furthermore, he wasn't a Black American descendant of people who were enslaved. His dad is African. His mother was American. Now, when Michelle's people get up there, well, then that's what we call that progress. But we'll take him. So 4 years ago, when people were tripping and shocked at the outcome, I'm like, well, where do y'all live? Do you live in America? Of course, the white man is going to beat the woman. How could you think otherwise? But he's a racist. And so what else is new? Y'all just mad at him because he's just saying publicly what you've been trying to deny and make us think we're crazy. We told y'all we weren't in a post-racial society. After 44 was elected, you told us to get over slavery. We said, okay, we went on and made the money. Not a problem. But now all of a sudden, here comes the white man, and suddenly racism is a thing. Guess what? We'll take it. And quite truthfully, there are many who are absolutely hopeful that things are going to change with this most recent outcome. Well, has that election been certified yet? Has GSA given them the money to get their little office space together and start transitioning? I don't think so. I stopped watching the news a while ago. I'm now on Game Show Network and Hallmark Channel. But I would imagine that there's still lies that are being put forth indicating that this outcome was stolen. Don't let John Lewis's death be in vain. Don't let Dr. King's death be in vain. Don't let Reverend Reeves' death be in vain. Don't let Viola's death be in vain. Because truthfully, slavery was going on before Black people or Africans were brought to this nation. This is really about greed, power, and control. Bill Moyer hit it. Transnational capital. This is about greed, power, and control. And if we ever are going to be the ones that we're waiting for, now would be the time for us to step up, show up, and speak up, and get real clear about what we're willing to die for. Because until and or unless we're willing to die for what we say we believe in, we're not anywhere near prepared to live. I'm reminded, and the wake-up call came in the movie Black Panther. That was a wake-up call to Black people saying, hello, don't believe the lies of the slave mentality. Get rid of your slave mentality. You are not inferior. You are not criminals. As a matter of fact, you are the gift. And the world is going to need you Black people to wake up out of your apathy and to tell your story and you are the vibranium. Now, that was a wake-up call. For what work? Well, the work was described in Avengers Endgame. We're in a fight for humanity because we're going to have to rebuild society. And it's going to take everyone, no matter what their earth suit, to come together in this fight for humanity. Why? Because we are the ones we've been waiting for. And the Washington Post in December 15, 2017 did a story through the eyes of a Black woman who was wondering how it was that a white woman, Viola Luzzi from Detroit, why would she even go down to Mississippi Alabama in the first place to help register Black people to vote, particularly when her husband told her, this isn't your fight. And she said, it's everybody's fight. When they interviewed her daughter for this piece, the daughter said this. They wrote, changing the world takes grit, grinding effort, unrelenting faith. In the journal, the Luizos, I practiced this morning, obtained from the FBI, my childhood hero wrote, Viola, I can't sit back and watch my people suffer about folks who look nothing like her. Explains Lily Bo, this is her daughter, quote, she actually believed it when Christ said that the suffering and needy are our people, end quote. Mom saw all other human beings as her people. And for that, the Black woman said, I'll be grateful. Until and unless we see all people as our people, until and or unless we see all people as part of the family of humanity, until we see and believe that we are one and figure out how to live together as one. Unfortunately, the prophetic words of Dr. King might truly ring true. If we don't learn how to live together as one, we're going to perish together as fools. And before the late Congressman John Lewis left this earth, he wrote a piece that showed up in the New York Times in July. And he again reminded us that we're one people. We live in one house. It's called the world. And he admonished us to come together and learn how to love one another in this house called the world. And I thank you for time today to just summarize and remind each and every one, summarize what I've heard today that resonated with me, and to remind each and every one of us that we are the ones that we've been waiting for. And what's next will determine how we answer the question, am I next? I yield back the balance of my time.
So we have some questions for you, Dr. J. If you could stay with us for a few more minutes.
I can do that.
Good. Wendy Stephenson asks in the chat, how do we get Truth and Reconciliation Project for atrocities committed against Indigenous, Black, and Hispanic peoples?
The same way Nelson Mandela and them did it. We are going to have to do it. We're going to have to demand it. I mean, and because it's right now, it's written on my canvas that I can see here that this is what it's going to take. So saying it to you today is just the first step toward that work. But on the website, I just put my paper away. Those associated with the organization, Fellowship of Reconciliation, are encouraged to learn how to become better allies. We don't need any allies right now. Just step up and speak up and demand, just like the Green Deal that the gentleman was speaking about earlier, just like we put forth any other legislation. Let's create a movement, a coalition, and begin to demand, particularly now in this administration of 46, whose narrative is we want to build back better and we want to heal the soul of the nation. Okay, you can't heal the soul of the nation. You can't have any healing until there's first acknowledgement of the wrong that's been occurred, repent, turn from our ways, ask for forgiveness, seek forgiveness, so the healing can take place. As long as we are denying that racism exists or denying the impact and the trauma of slavery, because this isn't helpful for anybody, the oppressed or the oppressor. It's not healthy. This is for our own healing that we need to go ahead and just do this work. So just like any other work, let's just go ahead, take the mic, Instagram, use social media, blogs, whatever. Let's just start talking about we must tell the truth. Whiteness was created. There really is one race, but we made it a social construct to subjugate and oppress other people. Thank you for that question.
We have time for another question or several. Gaylord Sisson, you've made some comments. Do you want to put that as a question if we unmute you? I don't know where he is. Here he is. Here. Yeah.
Okay, yes. No, I don't know if I wanted to put it as a question in that the question is, we're so myopic, we're worried about what's going on here in this country. What are we doing as activists in this country? Yet, because I'm going to Africa, I've studied all the countries in Africa, and then we've chosen which countries we're going to visit. But the long story short, the Africans, the activists there, are trying to have a united Africa and a different kind of government that is different than we were introduced to by the Europeans and by the colonists. My question is, what are we doing I don't know how to word it because I am very concerned, but we need to look at not just only what we're doing here, but also what we're doing and what activists are doing in third world countries. If you can comment on that, I would appreciate it.
Excuse me. Thank you for that question. My initial comment is something that we heard last century that I heard again this week, and that is to think globally, act locally. You know, when the Reverend Doctor this morning was talking about us being hyper-local, there is something to that. And I had the pleasure of attending the People's Gathering, a revolution of race consciousness this week, hosted by Pacific Lutheran University, convened by Peace Queen Melanie Denise Cunningham. And there was Dr. Wawa from, I think it's Nigeria, from Africa, who spoke. And he was talking about how it's time for Black American descendants of slaves, Black Americans, descendants of kings and queens of Africa, who were enslaved in this nation, to come together with Africans on the continent. And I believe as people like you who are compelled by this, you know, I could sense how you are compelled by this, then I would encourage you to do this. And I would imagine that within the next 7 days, you are going to encounter someone from Africa and have that conversation about just start hyper-local. Let's just start where we are, where we can, to start building the bridge. Because truth be told, they're the ones who sold us into slavery to the Britons. They just took it to a whole nother level. Because as I said, slavery was going on throughout the world. So there's healing that needs to take place also between Africans and Black American descendants of people who were enslaved. And this is, and your point is critical, because as we do our research, we remember and can recall that it was Hitler who got the concept of the Holocaust from the American slavery system. So what we do really does impact what goes on in the world. So start local. Start where we are.
Well, I think I have started local. I'm a chairman of the African American Writers Alliance.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, and so we are addressing that as well through our writing, our poetry, what have you. And we're trying to become more, ask people to be aware of what we're doing by going to our website, etc. So
thank you for your work.
I want you to know that.
I appreciate your work. Thank you. Thank you. Who's next? I'm not looking at the chat box. Who's next?
So, Elaine, you have a question.
Yeah, Dr. Johnson, I recently read Wilkerson's book, Caste, and found it really helpful to explain the system that we have here. Are you familiar with that? I assume you are. And
absolutely.
Comment?
Yes, race is a smoke and mirror. This is about greed, power, and control. That makes it more dangerous. And this is why all the white people I just talked about today who went to try to help Black people to vote were killed at the hands of white people. Racism is something that's made up. This fundamentally is about greed, power, and control, and it comes from fear. And as we know, only perfect love can cast out fear. You know, these European colonizers were operating from fear and hate. So until we really help and or pray or until really white people learn how to love, right, then only that can cast out fear, can we begin to truly dismantle the system. And that is why I agree with Reverend Doctor when she says she has hope, because this is a spiritual matter. And we can only address spiritual matters spiritually. And so those who are spiritual, it really is our call and charge to deal with this spiritually, to open up the way for us to walk in this as a reality in humanity, in the earth realm. Yes, greed, power, and control. It's a caste system, and we've just created ours based on race. We could have created the system such that all tall people were superior, in which I would be ruling the world, right? As a tall person. And wondering, well, my goodness, do I really want to share my power with short people? See how ridiculous this is? This is ridiculous to create this based on the amount of melanin one has in their earth suit, over which we had no say. Thank you for allowing me just to restate the operative point of the day's message.
Well, I think we can't hear it enough. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you all, and continue your great work. I honor you, I respect you, and look forward to partnering with you or working with you. You know how to reach me, because we have work to do, because we are the ones.
Yes.
And now is the time. This is the place, and we are the ones.
Yes. Thank you. So our next people are the young people, and Joanne Dufour is moderating our panel of young people. And let's get on to Joanne.
Okay, well, hello again, everybody. And it's an honor to be again part of another portion of this event, because the decision was made by the planners to really want voices of young people, and to hear some of the wording coming out of this amazing new generation. I have to say that as a former social studies teacher and teacher trainer, I do miss having the input of young people all the time. So it's been a pleasure to get to know some of these folks. As it turns out, not all of our panelists that are listed on the program were able to make it. Dora Hamilton had a personal emergency. So I do want to acknowledge that she would have been joining us. She will be able to, at least if she's not here today, to watch what would have happened. But I wanted to say that she was she's a junior at Capitol High School in Olympia, and she would have started off the program because she has an incredible passion, and her passion is around the issue of climate change, and she is working with a group of about 15 other teenagers at her school to raise consciousness and help organize efforts that are really going to create some positive change. In comparison to some of the other speakers, you'll hear voices of people who have walked through that same path that Dora is on. And Dora says, well, we haven't done much because we just started to organize, but her passion's going to get her there. And we're going to cheer her on when it does. And we hope that she'll be able to cope with the situation that she's facing right now. So we miss you. We miss you, Dora. However, we do have two live folks and a participant who had an unusual situation come up in her life. You will soon be meeting Lila Woodard. And Lila is not a Washingtonian, as are the other panelists, but she's coming to us from California. And she is a rather unusual young woman, you'll hear. And I'll just give you a little bit of information, because I think she was nice enough to make a tape. Now, she is all of 14 years old, and she has a strong interest in circusry. And she is a member of the Cirque du Soleil. They have a group of young people rather than the performers who were, trained adults, but they also have an auxiliary group, and she's part of it and she loves it. And it turns out that they are having a required training today, and that took precedence because that is her real love. Matter of fact, her love materialized because their group got invited to, of all places, Norway in 2017 for the installation of the Nobel Peace Prize to the same group I talked about earlier, the International Campaign Against Nuclear Weapons. So having seen and been a part of that experience definitely influenced this young lady. So I haven't seen the video yet, but if it's possible to get it up and running, I understood she connected it with the right people. So we'll sit back and see what she has to say.
Turn, turn, we gotta turn, turn, we gotta turn, turn, we gotta turn, turn, we gotta. The seas are rising, but the struggle is long. We're gonna turn history, turn it around, and the CEO's got money.
Hi everyone, my name is Lila Woodard. I'm from Santa Barbara, California, and I'm 14 years old. I'm so sorry that I couldn't be there live with you all, so I opted to make this video to still share with you my message and what I'm all about. So I am currently a peace activist on the mission to rid the world of nuclear weapons, and how I got introduced to this movement started with my circus company, Le Petit Cirque, which is an all-kid professional elite circus company based out of Los Angeles. And I joined them when I was about 9 years old and started training in things like contortion, hand balancing, aerial, foot archery, and things like that. And in 2017, we attended the Nobel Peace Prize concert in Oslo, Norway, to be one of their acts that performed in the concert. And before, I actually got to speak at the press conference to explain to everyone that we were so happy to be able to be performing there and to learn about ICAN, the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. And here I learned all about what ICAN is about, what they do, what nuclear weapons even were, because I had no idea before. And I just fell in love with what they were doing and wanted to be a part of it. So I went back home in Santa Barbara and started just kind of researching, learning even more about ICAN, and eventually I was asked by the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, headquartered here in Santa Barbara, if I would become a junior spokesperson with them. And of course I accepted, and so I've performed and spoke at a couple events, done different projects and parties and things to thank their donors for donating to their organization so they can go out and talk with leaders and just travel to be able to spread the word, spread the message, and work towards a world that will one day be free of nuclear weapons. So, recently you may have heard about Honduras ratifying the Nuclear Weapons Ban Treaty, and so that means that we have 50 nations who have ratified the treaty, and so it will take into effect, I think, late January, and that means nuclear weapons will now become illegal, and so nations who currently possess nuclear weapons will have to start mitigating their stockpiles and slowly but surely getting rid of their weapons so we can all have a safer world. And you may be thinking, well, what if a country doesn't comply? What if they don't want to give up their weapons? Like the major powers in the world, let's say US, North Korea, Russia, all those places, you might be thinking like, no way they're going to do that. But one of the solutions is that other countries could refuse to do trade with them, and so they will suffer economically, and they will just have basically an ultimatum. They'll have to get rid of their weapons or they won't have a country left. But yeah, so we are so happy that the Nuclear Weapons Ban Treaty was ratified, but that does not mean the work is over. So my main project is to go into schools and talk with kids, just like me, about nuclear weapons and what we can do to help the movement. And I've been to a couple schools so far, pre-coronavirus, but Yes, I shared a little slideshow presentation and performed a bit to tie in circus with piecework. And coming up, I hope to do some Zoom presentations over a Zoom call, Zoom assembly for different schools to continue the project in the current state that we're in. But yeah. And in my presentation, some of the things that I include is I talk a little bit about myself and how I got joined, or how I joined the movement, like I have been telling you all. But I also show a short video that explains why nuclear weapons are so bad. And I connect a lot with the personal stories that people have who have been affected severely by nuclear weapons, including survivors from the attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and nuclear accidents that have happened all over the world, and to show that why these are so bad, and to show that's really, really impacting people's lives in ways that we may not even think of. And one thing that has always stuck with me is that somebody who may have been present at a nuclear bombing, it affected their town, their city, their families. If let's say it was a woman who was pregnant at the time, their child, even though they haven't been born yet, they still may have effects of the radiation due to the weapons, that they could succumb to a number of diseases. And this just shows how brutal they are, how much harm, how much destruction they cause, and how detrimental they are to our world. And after I show that video, I go into a little bit more about the Nuclear Weapons Ban Treaty. I would list the current number of ratifications, but now we're at 50, which is, again, amazing. Yeah. And all in all, in that moment, I go over some of the main facts about nuclear weapons and their role in history and all of that. And at the very end of my presentation, I like to take questions from the kids, because when I first learned about nuclear weapons, when I was in Norway learning about ICANN, which is an amazing opportunity, I had so many questions because I had no idea about anything before. So I really love that they're able to come to me and relate to me since I am a kid, I'm around their age. Typically I do this for like middle schoolers, some high schoolers, around that age bracket. And yeah, I just love that they're able to, in some ways open up to me about, maybe what they've heard on the news, or what their families may have been talking about nuclear weapons, some conversations, some vocabulary they've heard that they don't know what it means. And I love when they're able to ask me these things, even though I'm totally not an expert. I don't know so much about, the scientific aspect, everything that goes into a nuclear weapon. I mostly focus on like world culture and personal relations and stuff like that. But I'm always trying to learn more and become more versed on those topics, so I'm able to better answer their questions when they have them. But anyway, I love when they ask me these questions, because the more knowledge that people have, the better they can help our world. And I'm not saying, if you're not smart, you can't help our world. Of course, everyone has a voice, and everyone should be accounted for and speak their mind, speak their views and opinions. But just the more people know, the more informed they are, obviously, and they can make wise decisions. And these people that I'm giving the presentation to, and people like myself, young people, this is going to become our world in not too long, when we get older. And so it's really important that they have this information, they know what's going on with this really huge topic, so that when it is their chance, and of course they can step up now, but when they're older and they're taken even more seriously, they can make a real big impact on the world. And hopefully by the time that I am of that age, I will be living in a world free from nuclear weapons, a peaceful, safe world, and I can't wait to make that happen.
Turn, turn, we gotta turn, turn, we gotta turn, turn, we gotta turn, turn. We got the seas are rising, but the struggle is long. We're gonna turn history, turn it around, and the CEO's got money.
But we do have two other people that we want to make sure that you get to meet, because they're also absolutely stellar people. And I will let them introduce themselves.
Yeah.
Our next young woman is Kimaya. If you can begin to give us your presentation. She's with Sammamish High School, but she'll tell enough about it. They do a much better job explaining their background than I do. So, Kimaya.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kimaya. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a junior at Sammamish High School, which is in Bellevue, Washington. And similar to Dora, who couldn't be here today, I also am really passionate about climate justice and fighting against climate change, and not just climate change, but also the issues that are interconnected with it, which are like racism, classism, ableism, and all of these other issues that are intertwined with it. So in March of 2019, I helped found an organization, which was at that point called Washington Youth Climate Strike. And we followed the lead of other international youth organizers who were organizing climate strikes in their communities. And we organized one in Seattle. And there was about 1,500 people at our first event, which was really exciting. And then we continued to grow our organization and expanded to other cities across the state. So now we have, I think, 11 or 12 different cities with youth organizers that organize at their schools or just in their communities in general, both around climate justice and especially this year, a big emphasis on racial justice and Black liberation as well, which goes really hand in hand with the climate crisis, since there's so many examples of how climate change is impacting Black and Brown communities and Indigenous communities way harder, way more intensely, and like before white communities or other, class privileged communities. So that's kind of like the work that I do right now. I am the executive coordinator of Washington Youth for Climate Justice, and we have over 100 youth organizers. And we've organized different protests and rallies and actions, as well as organizing with other groups around the racial justice movement. And a lot of the work that we do is just about like empowering youth and showing them like where their power can be, since most of our society is set up to not favor or to not necessarily give youth inherent power like in decision making. Like obviously we can't vote, and there's not a lot of room for us in like the political world, and so finding other ways to enact change and make our voices heard outside of just the political system is a big part of the work that we do and the work that I do with that organization.
Can you tell us, what does that actually mean week by week? How do you get yourself organized?
Yeah, so since we're a pretty large organization, we have lots of different teams that work on different topics based on what people are interested in doing. So we do have like, full organization-wide calls once a month, but the majority of the work that we do is done in different teams, and they all meet like on Zoom like this once a week too, which is something we did even before the pandemic, since we're all spread out across the state. We met mostly online, but we have, for example, like an education team is one of our biggest teams, and that team works on making like workshops and webinars and presentations to share with other youth, to present sometimes at schools before schools shut down, or to even just open up to the public online, that educates our community about different topics, both related to the climate crisis and also like about different political like systems and ideologies and that kind of thing. And, we have a policy team that worked these past few months on endorsing and helping to elect progressive candidates who were really good on climate justice and other issues to office at the statewide level. And we have some other teams also that are, we have local city teams and school chapters, and they organize different events or just organize to raise awareness in their communities or schools about the, about like the work that we do and the different issues that we're fighting for.
You talked about a clear cut one time, wasn't it? initiatives around the clear cut in one area? No.
I don't think so.
Okay, I might have gotten you confused. Excuse me. Okay, well, I have to say, listening to you is a social studies teacher's dream come true. So we have tried to get students to organize, and my gosh, you're doing it, and it's just a delight to hear that. But we haven't finished yet, folks. We have another young man that is joining us, and I think you will be extremely interested in what he's doing. Now, he's a little bit older, and he's over connected with Western Washington University, and his name is Hari Nath. And Hari, I know you're here, and if you could join us, and thanks a million. Kimaya, we'll talk to you later.
Hi. Yeah, so my name is Hari Nath. I go to Western Washington University. I am a sophomore. I actually just got into my major on Monday, but I'm majoring in energy science and technology, hoping to minor in political science and maybe physics. We'll see how all that goes. I think that before I was really, when I grew up in Olympia, Washington, so I grew up with a lot of activists and advocacy in my family, especially my sister, who was part of FOR a lot. I think that we've always had, not only our personal opinions, but we've also had like very good conversations with a lot of family members who are not from the United States, who don't deal with a lot of these social issues as like in front and headstrong in front of us as we do. I think we come at these issues very like right away because they're more prevalent in our country. And so I think having those conversations, especially with family, really teaches you how to like convince those who are closest to you how to like change their mind and that kind of thing. I really got into climate justice really when I think I always, felt very strongly about it. But when I got to college and started taking more and more in-depth classes, I really started to see how I can be a part of it and how I can help with it. I think that Washington is one of the greatest places for that, because not only are we like the #1 hydropower producer in the United States, but we've got a governor that leads us in so many different ways on climate justice. And I think it's so amazing to be here. One of the main issues that I focused on, especially at Western, is working with the displaced and homeless in Bellingham. So there's been a lot of a huge increase in refugees coming from Seattle to Bellingham. And I know that most of the people I met were Iraqi refugees. And I think talking to them, especially before COVID, talking to them was one of like my greatest gifts, because I got to see and hear from so many different parts of the world, and just these simple stories of families who had grown up in so much worse places than what we've been given. So one of the best things that we did in my club at Western is connecting Western students to the homeless and displaced in Bellingham by trying to like reduce that stigma of us and them. And so how we did that was the Friday before finals, we would, for 2 semesters before COVID, we would 2 quarters, we would bus up for free the homeless and displaced from the downtown Bellingham up to Western's campus, and students with extra meal cards and extra meal tickets could donate them and like have a sit down meal with these people. And it was one of the greatest things to see. I know so many kids would just come up and give like 30, 40 like meals, which is worth like easily some $100, and seeing Western students and seeing my peers be that generous is one of the greatest feelings you can ever have. But yeah, I think starting from a very local standpoint is the best thing we can do, because you start to understand those local issues a lot more that build up the huge national problems and international problems that we all face today. So yeah, being a part of this is very, very great. And it's a very fulfilling feeling.
So how many students do you find you're getting involved in the homeless effort? I mean,
the actual people working on the team specifically is about 15, but we work with other clubs that are more like general based, like they're not just focused on the homeless, we're focused on a lot of social advocacy stuff around Bellingham. And so usually when we do these events, we get about 100 students to come around and help. And then the students that actually donate meals is just all the students that are coming to the commons to eat, which is a really great.
Which is beyond your circle.
Huh?
Yeah, beyond your circle of 15.
Yeah,
it goes
it's
beyond,
a lot more than beyond our circle.
Yeah. Have you reached out to other universities, or have there been any?
Yeah, we reached out to UW, and they did something similar. which I thought was really great, because I know that Seattle has got an even higher, homeless population. I think at Bellingham, it's right now, it's about 750. I can't even fathom what right now in Seattle is like, especially with COVID, rent spikes and that kind of thing. So, but I know that UW back in our winter quarter did a similar thing where they had the students donate meals, and they thought it was a great idea and they loved it, because there's a club down there that did something similar. Yeah. So hopefully in the future we can collaborate more.
Okay, now let's assume that Dora's going to be listening at some point and you were going to give her advice, right? Because she's just beginning. Can you remember when you just started your group? And I mean, how did the actions develop, and how did you organize? What advice would you give her?
It was very disorganized in the beginning because we all felt very strongly about these issues. But I think the best thing you can do is start small. Start small and have just a very simple core idea that you're chasing, and let it build from there. Don't try to throw everything in at once, because it's just not going to work. You have to start with something small that everyone can like stand behind, and then keep pushing forward. So I know that in the beginning we were all trying to do a lot of stuff that was based around like racial discrimination and homelessness. And what we did was, when we focused on the homelessness situation, we ended up naturally working on the racial discrimination by talking to the minorities that were houseless in Bellingham. And it led to a lot of great moments and conversations that we had. Yeah, and we worked with Bellingham City Council to try and allocate funds for their next budget too, because they spend, and I'm sure most cities do this, but they spend a lot of money, on police budgets, and it's very frustrating when you're there trying to get your voice heard to allocate just some money to get like blankets, just bare essentials for human beings, But yeah.
So the homeless issue was the one that you focused on to begin with.
Yes.
Okay. And you kept it narrow, but then it expanded into city council attendance and participation, et cetera, et cetera.
Every meeting we would go there and just try to be heard. And I think they did a little bit, but not enough. And that's why we have to keep pushing.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good. And if I'm going to go back to Kimaya, if you could come back on, and I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your advice that you would give to Dora in getting started.
Yeah, I think something else that Hari said that I think is really important is like starting local and allowing things to be flexible and evolve with time. Because when we started Washington Youth for Climate Justice, we stayed out of politics for the most part. We were advocating like for a Green New Deal, and our focus was more specific, and like we didn't want to be too controversial. But as time changed, or like as time went on, and we saw like at all levels of government, like just very clear things that were needing to be advocated for, we realized we couldn't just remain neutral. Like there were certain things we had to take a stand on, and we wanted to focus on not just like climate change as, a scientific, like ecological issue, but as the social justice issue that it is. And so we took stances on, like defunding the police and like different like racial justice things, and immigrant justice, and like Medicare for all, and like certain things like that were intersected with it. And I think like allowing yourself to grow as like, as a youth activist, we don't like know, I was like 13 or 14 when I first started, and when you're that age, you don't know everything going in. And so making sure you're allowing yourself to grow as a person, because when you're a teenager, that is when you're learning a lot, and letting that growth reflect in the type of organizing and activism that you're doing, I think is really important to allow that.
And I think when I mentioned Clear Cut, I think that was Dora's project. I think that's what they were working on, and that's what I got confused about. But okay. So I have some other, and you're a junior, right? So what about after graduation? What are your plans?
So I'm actually graduating this year, a year earlier than typical, and I'm hoping to do a gap year. In between, like this next year, I'm hoping to take a gap year, and I want to study political science at college, and learn more about like political theory, especially is what's interesting to me, because like through the work that I've done, I guess I've just grown increasingly frustrated with our current political systems, and a lot of the ways in which they're just not working anymore. So in college, I'm hoping to, like, I guess just get a new perspective and use that knowledge about like political science and political theory to hopefully continue to organize after college and bring that knowledge into the organizing spaces I'm with. And during my gap year, I want to like continue to organize in different parts of the country or even parts of the world. Like I have family in India, and the Indian political climate is in some ways really similar to the United States, but also really different in a lot of ways. So it would be really cool if I would be able to go there or go to different parts of the country that aren't like Washington or Seattle, and learn about organizing there and just like trying different tactics and communication strategies.
So you don't see yourself becoming a politician or running for elected office, or do you?
No, not necessarily. I definitely think I want to focus my efforts on like using momentum outside of the systems to make change rather than just within the systems.
Okay. And when you talk to your friends, I mean, this is we've lived through this presidency, and this is what, the fourth president that you've in your lifetime. What are you taking away? How do you see the future for like the next 10 years?
That's a really good question. It's a pretty big question. Sure. I think most of my peer group and like most of my generation as a whole wasn't super excited for either option that we had going into this election. And I think there's a pretty common understanding that even though, the person who most of us like wanted to win did win, that doesn't mean that the work is over or that things are immediately going to like be comfortable or be okay. Like it's not like we can just turn off the activism and like, go back to like normal life or whatever. So I think there is an understanding that there's still a lot of work to be done. But I think the like biggest thing that people are realizing in terms of like what the future looks like is that we can't necessarily rely on the people that we elect. Like we can't always rely on politicians to continue the change that we need in order to survive. Like even if we're just looking at the climate crisis as one specific issue, there's not enough, I guess, quote unquote, like radical action enough to actually get us to the types of changes that we need in time in order to ensure that our planet isn't completely destroyed in the next like 10 to 15 years. And there's an understanding that a lot of that change is going to have to come from community movements and like putting on pressure from outside of just who we're electing to office. And that could be in the form of, like education, raising awareness, direct action, like other forms of community, just mobilization. And I guess in terms of what we're thinking, like the next 10 years is just going to be like a lot more hard work and just a continuation of the work that a lot of us have been doing, and just continuing to find new tactics, new strategies, and ways to like maintain, I guess, joy through all that, because it can be really like hard and tiring and just frustrating and overall disappointing when you're doing all this work and just consistently met with like a lack of victory and a lot of disappointment. So finding ways to continue that momentum while keeping like happiness at the forefront of it, I think is what the next 10 years looks like for us.
Okay. And how would, I'm thinking about 10 years from now for you and the folks that you're working with, what kinds of future do you see?
Clarifying, do you mean like for myself or for like the future for all of us?
For all of us.
Okay. Yeah. I think unifying, is something that we could do a really good job. I don't mean the United States. I mean all of us. I think it's the same thing I was talking about earlier, is that we've all got so many issues, and I'm not saying you have to pick one, but I'm saying there's so many things we care about, and there's so many things that are wrong that we are trying so hard to fix and change, that it's like, I feel like sometimes we get lost in our focuses. And I think sometimes the movements get so spread out that what happens is you can't hear because everyone's yelling at the same time. And I think if we were able to unify behind all of the issues, not just have like a faction of like, you know, a great example in my opinion would be the Democratic Party. Okay, we've got so many great issues we stand behind, but if we had like truly one person or one party that stood for all of these and not a split party, each standing for different things, I think we would do a much better job of progressing these issues. Yeah, I mean, obviously in my mind, the next 10 years is going to be very focused on climate change and climate justice, because this is like, we've already kind of lost our crucial last 10 years. I would say were the most crucial, when we could really have pushed more and more. But I think what we can do right now is really increase our green renewable energies and really incentivize those oil refineries and corporations to reduce their pollution outputs. I think that, you know, I remember watching the debate between Mike Pence and Kamala Harris, and I was like, all he's saying is keep fracking, and I was very disappointed. I was very like frustrated as to why they couldn't just delve into the issues. They just said the same words over and over, and I was just very disappointed, you know. But yeah, no, I think that focusing our efforts on, you know, green and renewable energies is something we can do a much better job of. We're already doing a great job in Washington. I think if we can hopefully keep pushing that and have a great lead and like show other states how it's not that impossible, I think we do a really good job. I think what happens a lot of the time is that those issues are put forth and our political system just shuts them down, because our political system is designed, well, it worked a few hundred years ago. It worked very well. I don't think it works very well right now. And it's very disappointing, heartbreaking to see a lot of these amazing issues be like trampled on when people's voices are trying to be heard.
Yeah, but you're the voices that are going to continue.
That's
I did ask Lila the same question, and I asked her short term and long term, and she said she's currently planning on pursuing a career as a professional circus performer with a company like Cirque du Soleil. Her future world, well, one day this is a direct quote now. One day there will not be a single nuclear weapon present, and our world will face conflict with a conversation instead of a bomb. So I'm hoping that you folks will include the nuclear issue along with the other advocacy. Of course, that's my personal interest. I think this goal requires a little work from everyone, as the current problems we face is such a big one. She looks up, and when I asked her about leadership, she looks up to Bea Finn. She's the executive director of ICANN, working to spread this message and influence so many that I can carry on her work and impact the world. Well, I guess, you know, there might be a job application to ICANN if, in the future, and we'll see whether or not she applies. So I want to thank both of you very, very much. Our time is running out, but you have certainly given us a great deal of hope for the future. Just good luck. And you know we love you, and so keep carrying on.
Thank you, Joanne, and thank you, Hari and Kimaya and Lila and Dora. We have a song by Susan McRae to send us on our way, and we'll be open for 15 minutes or so after her song. If you have last minute things to say in the chat, or when there are a few people left, we can talk perhaps a little bit. So Susan, are you ready?
Yes. So this is a song that I actually learned from Backbone. They sent a link to the Seattle Thrive Choir singing the song We Shall Be Known in 2017. And I was just blown away by this song. And I can remember writing my Swedish cousins and my sisters to share it. And I brought it to my women's sing group here in Olympia. We sang it at the Women's March. We've been singing it ever since. The words are so powerful. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time now, and what a time to be alive in this great turning. we shall learn to lead with love. And just this last January, thanks to Carolyn Treadway, I was introduced to the work of Joanna Macy, which put this great turning into complete context. So I will put a link to the Seattle Thrive Choir singing this song into the chat if people want to learn it. And I think that we all should be singing this song. And I've had a frog in my throat all morning, so I'm not my best singing today, but it is what it is. So, we shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time to lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for coming. Thank you especially to the many people who helped us put this together. And I'm going to say the names of people that come to mind, and there are others. Divi Bartram, Elaine Hickman, Carrie Griffiths, Fred Silsby, Bruce Pruitt-Ham, Patty Lyman, Jean Buskin, Marty Lambert, Sandy Ware, Carolyn Treadway, and many more. It was a community experience to learn how to do this on Zoom. And
thank you, Jean. We need to give you, Jean, a great credit.
Yes. I'm glad we were able to do this, and hope that next year we can meet in person, but however we'll meet. So we're done when you're ready to go. And it's hard for everybody to unmute and say hello to each other, but feel free to say goodbye to all or one of us in the chat. And
don't forget to download the chat if you want to.
That's right, yeah. And you will get an email that will tell you where the recording's available and give you some resources from our presenters and the rest of us. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.